Something changed with this car. Not the paint, not the aero package, but something deeper, something structural. When Red Bull revealed Verstappen's new machine, it wasn't just another evolution. It was a declaration and a warning. Because this isn't just Red Bull defending a title. It's Red Bull reshaping the way Formula One works. The engine's different. The philosophy's different. And behind the scenes, some insiders are saying, this is the most radical reset Red Bull has ever attempted. And if what they've just built actually works, then nothing, not even Mercedes, will look the same after this. When Red Bull presented Verstappen's new car, it didn't feel like a typical launch. No dramatic music, no flashy slogans, just calm, calculated confidence, and a machine that looked more like a weapon than a showpiece. The design wasn't aggressive. It was refined. Sharper in the places that matter. Cleaner in the places where drag used to hide. Every inch seemed intentional. But it wasn't just the car that caught attention. It was the people. Verstappen looked relaxed, not relieved, but ready. The kind of energy you see when a driver knows something others don't. Horner, typically animated at these events, played it low-key. Precise. Guarded. Almost clinical. There were no wild predictions. No promises of domination. But between the lines, the message was clear. They know what they've built. And maybe more importantly, they know what everyone else hasn't. Because this wasn't just about a car reveal. It was about control, complete control. From chassis design, to aeroflow, to power unit mapping. Every major component now comes from inside the same walls. Red Bull doesn't owe answers to Honda anymore. They don't coordinate with an external manufacturer. They built this car, and the engine inside it, on their terms. That matters. Because in a season defined by new regulations, new weight distributions, and new hybrid behavior, the teams that control their own systems will survive the chaos better than the ones that don't. And that's where the story really starts. When Red Bull presented Verstappen's new car, it didn't feel like a typical launch. No dramatic music, no flashy slogans, just calm, calculated confidence, and a machine that looked more like a weapon than a showpiece. The design wasn't aggressive. It was refined. Sharper in the places that matter. Cleaner in the places where drag used to hide. Every inch seemed intentional. But it wasn't just the car that caught attention. It was the people. Verstappen looked relaxed, not relieved, but ready. The kind of energy you see when a driver knows something others don't. Horner, typically animated at these events, played it low-key. Precise. Guarded. Almost clinical. There were no wild predictions. No promises of domination. But between the lines, the message was clear. They know what they've built. And maybe more importantly, they know what everyone else hasn't. Because this wasn't just about a car reveal. It was about control, complete control. From chassis design, to aeroflow, to power unit mapping. Every major component now comes from inside the same walls. Red Bull doesn't owe answers to Honda anymore. They don't coordinate with an external manufacturer. They built this car, and the engine inside it, on their terms. That matters. Because in a season defined by new regulations, new weight distributions, and new hybrid behavior, the teams that control their own systems will survive the chaos better than the ones that don't. And that's where the story really starts. At first glance, the RB22 looks like a natural successor to last year's dominant machine. But it's not. Because buried underneath the familiar lines are changes that even rival engineers didn't see coming. And it starts with the engine architecture. This isn't just Red Bull powertrains adapting to the new 2026 regulations. This is Red Bull building an engine, from the ground up, for one very specific thing. Instant energy deployment. Not over a straight, not over two sectors, but corner to corner, throttle to throttle. That's the real philosophy shift here. Because while most teams are still figuring out how to balance battery life with race-long efficiency, Red Bull's gone the other way. They're front-loading power, spiking deployment in short bursts, maximizing mechanical grip through torque injection, in low-speed exits and complex braking zones. In other words, they're using the engine as a handling tool, not just a power unit. That's bold, because it demands perfect synchronization between chassis behavior and energy control. It also requires massive trust in thermal stability, which is something very few teams are confident in this early in the cycle. But Red Bull? They've already run this system full load in simulation. And according to internal sources, Verstappen adapted to it in under 40 laps. That's the part that caught the paddock off guard. Because if he's already confident with this aggressive energy strategy, before testing even begins, then Red Bull isn't just ahead in development. They might already be committed to a philosophy that the rest of the grid hasn't even dared to try. Red Bull says this car marks a new era. But that transformation isn't just happening on the track. Internally, the team looks more unified than ever. Every system flows through the same chain of command. Aerodynamics, cooling, energy deployment, power unit integration. It's all being built under one roof, on one timeline, with no external partners slowing things down. But that kind of centralization comes at a price. Because when everything runs through the same system, there's no one left to blame when something breaks. And that's where a quiet shift is starting to take hold inside Milton Keynes. What Red Bull built over the last 2 years. The vertical structure, the integrated engine program, the simulation-first approach, has made them faster, but also more fragile. More efficient, yes, but also more exposed. Because now, when Verstappen gives feedback, it doesn't go to a supplier. It goes right back to the same people who designed the solution. When data from a failed sim run comes in, there's no buffer between the chassis team and the engine engineers. No outside party to delay the fallout. And when the performance isn't perfect, the responsibility sits entirely inside the building. That's a new kind of pressure. And not everyone inside the structure is built for it. A few quiet exits from the powertrains division over the winter suggest some engineers weren't aligned with the pace or the philosophy. One senior figure reportedly clashed with the new deployment team over aggressive torque mapping and left before final testing. These aren't public stories, but they matter. Because this car isn't just the product of a new design cycle. It's the product of a new culture. One that moves fast, takes risks, and doesn't wait for outside validation. That's what makes it dangerous. Not just for the competition, but potentially for Red Bull themselves. If something starts to go wrong, there's a reason no one inside Red Bull is talking about the risks. Not in press briefings, not in interviews, and definitely not during the car launch. Because the real risk here isn't the RB22 itself. It's what it represents. This car isn't just a new generation. It's the product of a structural philosophy shift. A shift that's eliminated the traditional safety nets most teams rely on. And that silence we saw at the launch? That careful control of the message? It wasn't just PR strategy. It was containment. Because what Red Bull has done, quietly, is remove layers of insulation between failure and visibility. In previous years, a bad engine map was Honda's problem. A failed cooling solution might be traced to a supplier. A deployment strategy that didn't sync with the chassis? That could be adjusted by a third-party specialist. Now, there's no outside team. No backup. No buffer. Everything, every subsystem, every component, every result, comes from the same internal process. Which means the pressure doesn't just fall on one department. It falls on everyone. If a test fails, it's not just a performance issue. It's a team-wide breakdown. And when that happens, when trust in the system starts to crack, he'll speak louder. He'll put pressure not just on the garage, but on the structure behind it. And Red Bull knows this. Because in 2026, they don't just need Verstappen to drive fast. They need him to believe. In the system, in the car, in the new way this team operates. Because if he starts to question it, even quietly, that uncertainty travels. It reaches engineers, strategists, partner meetings, boardrooms, and in a year where every team is adapting to new regs, Where Ferrari, Mercedes, even Audi are waiting to pounce, Red Bull can't afford hesitation. Because what they've done with the RB22 isn't just push the limits. They've moved them. And if it works? If the hybrid system stabilizes? If the torque injection strategy delivers? If the thermal balance holds across race distances? Then we're looking at a team that could dominate this era, with a level of control F1 hasn't seen since the V8 days. But if it doesn't? If reliability falters? If integration issues resurface? If Verstappen starts questioning the feedback loop between what he feels and what the data says, then this isn't just a design risk. It's a title threat to themselves. Because when a team bets everything on one system, one structure, one philosophy, they either build the future or give it away. So now, all eyes turn to Bahrain. Not for lap times, not for press conferences, but for silence or the lack of it. Because if Red Bull runs clean, if Verstappen pushes the car and says nothing, that's when you know it's working. But if the tone shifts, if the energy deployment is dialed back, if the simulations no longer match the real-world data, if Verstappen starts testing boundaries instead of confirming performance, then the pressure will return, quietly, relentlessly, from the inside. Because the truth is, this RB22 doesn't just mark a new car. It marks a before and after. Before, a Red Bull that dominated with clear hierarchies, known quantities, proven systems. After, a Red Bull that's rewritten its own rulebook, and may have removed the safety net in the process. And if this car stumbles, even slightly, in the early flyaways, questions won't just come from rivals. They'll come from within. Did they centralize too much? Did they move too fast? Did they trust the new engine architecture before it was ready? And if the answers aren't clear, then this car could become the moment Red Bull's control turned into exposure. Because that's what happens when you build something this integrated. When it works, it's unstoppable. But when it doesn't unravel slowly. It breaks, all at once. And the first crack? It usually comes from the one place you thought was strongest.